Hey, what's good, fam? Welcome to another episode of the Feed Me, Fuel Me podcast. Durs and Jeff coming to you from Scottsdale, Arizona, and we have the pleasure of sitting down with the founder of Small Business 101, Brandon Pride,
Man,
who made the trip from the snowy peaks of Sedona to be with us today. Appreciate you making the drive, my man.
yeah, thanks for being here, dude.
Thank you.
A little backstory before we dive into your backstory. You and I have been acquaintances in and out of business. You've been a mentor of mine, a coach of mine, and a confidant as I've moved through the uncharted waters of entrepreneurship over almost the last decade. We started working together and developing a relationship very, very shortly after I got out of the Marine Corps. And so you've been witness to my evolution and the increase of my business acumen, and now as you've launched and refined Small Business 101, your mission is to really dampen the learning curve so that people don't have to put themselves through the school of hard knocks as it pertains to entrepreneurship. And you're one of the most intuitive individuals I've ever met. And we, much like Jeff and I have the conversation about the universe conspiring in your favor and getting out of your own way and acknowledging that you don't know what you don't know. You've made that a very systematic process in the way that you coach. And I really want to dive into your story and how that part of your being has led to that being your practice.
Sure.
So for everybody who doesn't know who you are, kind of give us the cliff notes of your journey from the Pacific Northwest to your transition to Scottsdale and your evolution to Small Business 101.
Oh boy. Okay. So yeah, I grew up in Oregon, small little town, and the place was made up of mostly bars and churches, and that's what we had to look forward to. Okay. So spent a lot of time outdoors and made some really good lifetime friends there, and started getting a little older, got into high school, and it was an interesting phase because you don't really know who you are, what you want to be, or what you want to do. At least I didn't. Yeah, sure. I had zero clue. But I knew at the time I didn't want to be where I was. And that was really what I based my decision making off of. So I had graduated high school, barely. They put me in the bad kids class. So I was in Salem.
Were you like the class clown, or were you just really disruptive? Like
both.
What category did you fall in?
Both.
Okay.
I excelled in both areas.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got in a lot of trouble.
Sure.
And it got to a point where, when you meet with the counselor, here's what you need to do, and you're going to graduate. And they looked at me and they're just like, this is crazy. They're like, you're not going to graduate. And this is my junior year. Okay. Or end of the junior year, somewhere in there. And they're looking forward, like, you don't show up, you don't do anything, this is crazy. And I'm like, well, at that time, I didn't care.
Yeah,
sure. I was like, whatever. I was doing whatever I was doing, which was a bunch of nonsense. But I told my mother this, and she got pretty upset. And so I saw how much it meant to her for me to graduate. So I'm like, well, shit. I'm like, what can I do? So they said, we're going to put you in this special class, and it was the worst kids in the high school. I mean, you name it, drug dealers, gang, all the bad kids, whatever. So I spent my how's it go?
Summer going into your junior year?
Yes, thank you.
Junior year going into senior year?
And my senior year in the bad kids class.
Yeah.
And honestly, that worked better for me than anything, and the reason being, and it probably has to do with a part of why I am the way I am today, is it was hard for me to go to class and listen to someone just talk at me. I couldn't do it. And then trying to be engaged or fit the pieces together, I could never do it. And so, and then I lost interest in the first 5 minutes, and I was skipping the next class. So I did the class, and what they did is they let me just almost independent study. They said, here's the material, here's what you need to know, learn it. Perfect. So that's what I did. If I needed help, then I'd ask them. They'd fill in the blanks, and I kept going. And I excelled at that.
Yeah.
And so I graduated high school, which I almost missed my own graduation. That was so. Where I grew up, we used to go to the sand dunes. It was called Sand Lake.
Okay.
And so you'd go four-wheeling and ride dirt bikes. Yeah. And of course, there's this huge party because we're all graduating. And I fall asleep at whatever hour I fall asleep at. And I wake up. And mind you, there's like 100 people at this party.
Yeah.
Out at the dunes. I wake up and I look around and everybody's gone. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I've never been so freaked out. So anyway, I started the car and I drove like 115 miles an hour all the way from the coast to Salem. And I had enough time to go home, get my cap and gown. And I walked, as the people were walking into the stadium, I just joined my spot in line, walked through, and that was it. Yeah. So, made it through that, made Mom happy. And so for a few years running, I had been going to Northern California, Trinity Shasta Lake. And I was going with my friend and his family. And so 4th of July, I'd go down and camp. So we went down there. And down there having fun and boating and wakeboarding and all that. And I ended up getting I don't know how it really transpired, but at the time, I had a couple days left there and we were supposed to go back home. And for some reason, I didn't want to go back home. And I think it made it easier for me to make that decision because I was removed from the situation.
Oh, sure.
And it was difficult because all my family's there. And obviously that's all I've known for 17 years, but I didn't want to go back home. So I ended up catching a ride with a guy from Northern California down to L.A. And I went to L.A. My cousin lived there with my aunt in Seal Beach.
Okay.
And so I was going to turn 18 in August. I was still 17. So that kind of created waves. But I did it because who was going to stop me, right?
Sure.
That was the mentality. So I get there, and I'm there for 2 days, and I get arrested.
Damn.
Yeah, that was really cool. So I get in trouble. It's this whole ordeal, and because I'm a minor, so they release me to my aunt, and of course, shit hits the fan at that point.
Right.
Get your ass back here. And I was so defiant, and I just remember saying, no, you can't make me. I'm going to be 18 in a few weeks, couple weeks, whatever it was. And it was a pretty emotional deal. But at the same time, I didn't really care because I was going to do me, and I didn't want to be around any of that. And, left my job pumping gas, and I was on to bigger and better things. So I ended up actually, the guy I went camping with, he ended up coming through California. He was on his way to Arizona to play football.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, you want to pick me up on your way through town and I'll join you? So I did. Or he picked me up and I went with him. And it was interesting because I didn't have any money at that point.
Yeah.
Zero. And I was like, holy shit, what do I do? And so I went to say goodbye to my uncle. And him and my dad were close. They were military buddies and they did all that stuff. So Uncle T was a cool guy. And he's like, you got any money? And I'm like, mm-mm. Yeah. And he literally reached into his pocket and he gave me what he had. It was like $70. I remember it because I had the $70 and I had a little blue duffel bag. And that's what I made my, that's how I got to Arizona. So I had no idea what the hell I was doing or where I was going. I ended up here, and I'm going to condense this next part because it was a very interesting time in my life. But I spent 2 years running around, pretty much being out of control.
Okay,
and
it's very easy to do in this town.
Oh my God! Well, yeah, and I, being 17, just turning 18 years old. I mean, you think you got it going on? And I didn't know shit, but. So anyway, next 2 years were pretty rough. They were very hard on me. I just went through a lot of crazy stuff.
Took a couple years off your life?
Probably. Yeah. I guess since we're there, there was a couple really hard parts about that time, but the biggest one, which it really stuck with me and was a catalyst for change in my life at that point. I almost died twice. I almost got murdered on 2 different occasions.
Damn.
I know it sounds crazy, but the first one was just a random act in front of a Fry's grocery store over in Glendale, Maryville area. That was just weird for all the reasons you could imagine. And looking down the barrel of a Desert Eagle handgun that's exciting. It's eye opening, yeah. So. Made my way out. You know, I was that night I was like, oh my God, I'm alive. And the next day I just started running around doing the same shit. So a few weeks go by, and then there was another thing, and basically I was around some people I shouldn't have been around.
Sure.
And I was privy to...
Were you hustling on the scene too, or...?
No, I was, I don't know. I was just there.
Just there? Okay.
Yeah, I was there. And, yeah, these were bad guys.
Sure.
And they were doing bad things, and I probably was around for some things I shouldn't have been around for, and because I was, it created a problem.
Yeah.
I became a problem.
Sure.
Yeah. So the short version is I watched 2 guys get shot. That was my first encounter with extreme violence.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd seen some pretty bad stuff and been in fights and gotten my ass kicked a bunch, but yeah, it was my first encounter with extreme violence, and it scared me straight.
Yeah, sure.
To see what can be done and what people will do for nothing.
Sure.
And yeah, so there's more to that, but that's the simple version.
Yeah.
So that, and the freakiest part was the guy that was coming after me. We actually ended up in the back seat of a car together.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, because what had happened, everybody had split. There was this big party, and everybody left, and everybody's getting in cars, and we're going, and I get in the back, and I think, oh, my God, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm out of here. As soon as we're getting ready to take off, the door opens, and I look, and this guy gets in. And that's the most scared I've ever been in my life. I was like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, I'm like, really? I'm like, and then, because it happened a few weeks prior to that, you start thinking, and you're like, I really screwed up. I had my warning, if you will, and I didn't heed the warning. So now I'm going to get it.
Right.
I mean, I was thoroughly convinced that was it. After the adrenaline wore down, the other guys in the car realized that this guy was in the car, but they didn't know what his role was in this thing.
Sure.
And so I'm sitting there, and they're talking to me, and I'm not saying anything, and I'm just like, I'm going to die. I'm like, this is how shitty. And they pull the car over, and they, because they didn't really know that guy, they kick him out. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to live. So literally after that, I probably a few days later, I figured out how to move downtown Phoenix. And that was kind of the fresh start.
Sure.
There were some other things that happened, almost kind of a final test on what direction I would go in life, And so...
all this happened, you can't even drink legally yet?
No, yeah, no.
That's fucking insane.
I know. Honestly, I forget about most of it, so when it does come up, I don't even know what to think about it, to be honest. I mean...
Well, when you experience, trauma that's significant, like in such a condensed period of time, you blank tape so much of that. Like, that's a psychological fact. Like, to ask somebody who's experienced like crazy trauma, or what they perceive to be crazy trauma, to recount those events in detail, part of the psyche is to erase it from conscious memory so that you can move on. It's part of the it's a subconscious reaction to trauma, so that's it's not unheard of that you can't recount it in like graphic detail.
There's certain parts I remember very vividly, and then there's other parts to save my life I couldn't remember. But anyway, so all this happens, and gives me a different look on things, but I'm still too young and immature to even have any clue.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, I need to do something with my life.
Yeah.
And I literally walked up and down Central Avenue with what might be called a resume. I mean, it was kind of a joke. I didn't have any real work experience. I had done a few odd jobs and had a little experience. So I walked up and down Central Avenue with this resume. And I remember I'd been going and nothing had happened. And so I had crossed the street and I was coming back, and there was a sign shop, Fast Signs on Central.
Okay.
And I walk in, and this guy's like, "Can I help you?" I'm like, "I'm looking for a job." He goes, "Well, what can you do?" I'm like, "I don't know. What do you want me to do?" He's like, "Can you make signs?" I'm like, "Probably." I'm like, "Just show me." He's like, "All right, kid." He's like, "Come back tomorrow morning and we'll talk." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. I might have a job." So I went back, and he actually hired me. His name's Scott Koehler. He owns Fast Signs on Central. And Scott was the first person that I came across at that point in my life, this new part down here, that he was the first major influence, positive influence on my life. And he kind of drilled me. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "What's happening?" And he's like, "All right." And I don't know. He was kind enough for whatever reasons to kind of take me in. He gave me a job. I started out in the back. Then I moved to customer service. Then I moved to outside sales. And so, I'd had a sales job before that, and a couple of them. But anyway, he takes me under his wing, and I start learning about small business. Invoicing, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and here's how it works. And so, I don't know. I just, that had always intrigued me. And I had done other entrepreneurial things, nothing noteworthy, but so I started learning about small business, and that kind of got me on that track. And that was the first real positive business influence in my life.
Is that also a moment where you consciously realized the value of mentorship, or did that come later?
That came way later.
You're just basking in good fortune at this point?
Yeah, that I could get a paycheck and I could feed myself. And
you're on the straight and narrow now?
For the most part. Yeah, I was still a little squirrely.
Yeah.
It helped. It was the first major stepping stone.
Okay. So when did you leave the safety net, if you will, of somebody else's organization and really start stepping out on your own? Because when I met you, you were in the middle of launching Tallcat and getting that thing rolling. So, based on your timeline, there's like 5 years in there where you were, between Fast Signs and
there's
Tallcat,
a lot of stuff that happened.
Like when did you figure it out that doing your own thing was the thing?
So, not too shortly thereafter, what had happened is he was big on education. So he's a very educated guy. Science, chemistry, physicist, engineer. I mean, he was a great mind, but he owned a sign shop. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And so he was like, "You really need to go to school." But I'd never liked school, and I'm like, how the hell do I know what I want to do or what I'm going to be good at? So that was an interesting point, because at that point I had started, when you don't know anything, you tend to talk to a bunch of people to try to figure it out. And everybody kept coming back with different answers. And none of them really resonated with me at all. And I'm like, fuck, I'm not any better or smarter after doing that. I'm like, this doesn't solve my problem.
Right.
And then I got to a point where people they were telling me what I should do. This is what you need to do and how it goes. And I wasn't buying that at all because I didn't believe it. And, you need to go get your 4-year degree. You need to da-da-da-da-da-da. I just mentally, I couldn't get there.
The paint by numbers thing.
Yeah. Couldn't do it. So that's when I made a real decision. I remember I even wrote it down. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try and do for myself so that I know. Okay.
Be your own experiment.
That's it.
What year was this? Around what year?
Oh God. I came here, I was 17. I was 2002. So this was probably about end of 2003.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that right? No. Honestly, I don't know. Let me see. I came around when I was 17. It was 2002. Oh, so I was about 19 at the time.
Okay.
So it was probably 2004. Is that
Okay.
right? Yeah. Because I spent the 2 years running around, and then I got the job.
Okay.
So yeah, I was like, I'm gonna find out for myself how this stuff works.
Sure.
Doesn't mean I'm gonna have an answer, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna figure it out.
Okay.
And so I kept working there, and then I got involved in martial arts. Met a really great guy. He was my teacher, and not only in martial arts but in life. And that was an interesting story too. That was like the second major influence in my life. I thought I was going to learn martial arts and do all the fun, cool stuff. And looking back in hindsight, what that really was an opportunity for me to really heal.
Yeah.
And really kind of get things together. I didn't know how far off track I was at the time.
Sure.
I was just, it was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And that man was very kind, and he guided me very patiently over from 2004 to 2008.
Okay.
And that's where I actually did a lot of real personal development. And in that time, I had had a couple jobs, and then I was working at the martial arts studio, and then I had went to University of Phoenix, and I was selling education, and I was slammed. I mean, I can sell. So yeah, I was making great money.
Selling education with no degree?
Yeah.
I fucking love
Isn't that funny?
That's awesome.
I know. Yeah, listen to me because I know best, right? Anyway, so, I had done different things, and then I ended up helping him open a second martial arts studio. So that was fun. I liked that. It was a little bit of creativity and a little bit of, excitement.
And that's that hands-on experience, it seems, yeah.
Yeah, and I just jumped all in because it was something I was passionate about. I liked being able to do that. And so what had happened is because I got so much into that, and this is the earlier on part of that, I got fired from the sign shop because he said I was too distracted.
Okay.
And then that's when I had gotten the job at University of Phoenix after that. So,
Okay.
yeah, I got fired. So that was interesting, and I didn't know what was going to happen to that relationship. And then several, it was a couple years later, fast forward, I had come back to him after I got fired from University of Phoenix. So I get fired from Fast Signs, go to University of Phoenix, get fired from University of Phoenix. That was a whole interesting thing. That was like the thing where I knew I don't want to work
for anybody.
I sure as hell don't want to do corporate. I've never seen such craziness and stupidity. It's maddening. I don't know how, if you can do it, more power to you. I can't. It doesn't work for me. Stand right here from 12 to 5 and jump up and down. Then, after that, go over here and pat your head. I can't do it. So I was like, all right, well, what the hell am I going to do? So I was like, I'm going to go into business for myself formally. And I had gained a lot of experience at the sign shop installing signs. So I made a job out of it. And, of course, I knew a guy who had a bunch of deals. So I said, I'm going to do the installs. He goes, all right. He goes, fine. He goes, here. He goes, go do them. I'm like, awesome. So, I'm making like $35 an hour. And all I did was run around and install signs all day, mostly graphics. Ended up doing where I could, do a whole vehicle and all that stuff. So that was pretty cool. And I made pretty decent money. Yeah. But I was still being a schmuck. And so, I'd gotten a taste of that, and I liked it. And, at that point, I was making a living on my own. For my own efforts, I wasn't, I didn't have a job. So, I mean, technically, I've been unemployed for many years. Yeah. Because I've never worked for anybody.
Sure.
So, did all that, learned a lot, and I figured, I should probably get a little more serious if I'm going to do this. So I did, and then there was kind of a family emergency. My grandmother got ill, and, probably one of the absolute most meaningful people to me in my world. Yeah. And so that was a weird thing, and I didn't really want to go back home, but...
Because throughout this whole period, you haven't been home yet.
I don't recall.
Yeah.
Maybe once or twice, but not really.
Yeah.
Probably a few times, I think. That was a while ago. So I decided to go back home for a year.
Okay.
And I spent time with, much time with Grandma as I could. And that was bittersweet. It was great to see Grandma, but for me, everything else sucked.
Okay.
Because there's nothing to do there. There's no opportunity. I ended up, I worked construction, which is fine because I worked for a great guy and it was fun stuff, but it's not what I wanted for myself.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I had come back to Oregon, I just put everything I had in a car and drove up.
Yeah.
That was it. I didn't have a real life. I didn't have a real home. I didn't, I was so unstable in every facet of my life. And so I just kept bouncing around and doing all this stuff. And then fast forward, it's time for her to check out, which she told me before. She's like, I'm ready to go. I'm like, well, if you're going, I'm going. I'm not sticking around. So said my goodbyes and left, came back to Arizona. And that's when I opened up a sports therapy clinic with a guy I knew over in Scottsdale and got that up and going, and that was good and learned a lot, made some decent money. I mean, I didn't get rich by any means. I mean, enough to pay the bills. But it was fun.
Yeah.
And I'd met some great people through that. And, but I was still very unclear about what I was going to do or be. And so I had gotten approached by a guy who had an idea, and he was working on this project, and he told me about it. So he shared his vision with me, and I thought it was pretty intriguing. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's exciting. And I'm like, that'd be fun to be a part of. I don't want to keep doing this. Yeah. And at that point, it was all about making money. How could I get rich, and how could I become a millionaire? I mean, all these things that respectfully today, I think, for me, they don't mean anything. I mean, back then it was my entire life. Yeah. And I was hell-bent on doing it, and at all costs. So I joined up with him, and it was like 8 agonizing months of trying to get capital. Yeah.
So at 8 agonizing months trying to source capital, because I've been a student for so long, what you're about to dive into intrigues me because it's not been ultra hard for me to, fund and get the gym going and keep it going.
Lucky you.
Right? No, seriously. What makes generating capital so fucking difficult for people that are at that stage of the game without the mentors that I've had to help me do it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because a lot of people think that like at this part of business is based completely on the idea.
It's probably in my experience for me, it's probably one of the most complicated and misunderstood pieces. Yeah. It is way harder than people think. And it depends on what you're doing. So where we were at that point, he had an idea. And some drawings,
no proof
some
of
renderings.
Concept, no nothing.
No, there was no proof of anything. Nothing had been validated. I mean, this was like, it was pie in the sky shit. Yeah. But there's something to be said for believing and having that passion and that energy, because if we didn't have that, those elements, nothing would have transpired. So what ended up happening, because of our own conviction and belief and excitement, we were able to get the attention of a couple guys. Okay. And it took a long time. And by the way, so what had happened is I'd had the sports therapy clinic, and I'm like, well, either I'm going to do this new thing full time, or I'm going to let this go, or what am I going to do? So I'm like, I'll just let it go. And I'm in. I'm doing, that's how much I believed in this. I'm like, I'm going to be rich. So I turned it over to the guy that I was with, and well, I had no income. So that tells you how far ahead I thought at that time.
Yeah.
I didn't understand planning at all. It was literally like task or action of the day, kick ass, go.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, I got a little bit of money, so I can get, a few months will be okay.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, not knowing shit, I'm like, oh, we'll get money.
Yeah.
We'll get money. Well, month 2, 3, 4. Okay, now I'm out of money. Can't pay my own bills.
Sure.
Oh, by the way, I got a car payment. Can't pay that. Oh, fuck. So it just starts looking real bad. Very dismal. I'm like, what did I do? And this is the first time that I ever went like all in. Before it was very hodgepodge, and I could stay here and do that and make a few bucks. And I had a job I didn't. Then I had my own thing. And this was like my first real all in. And boy, did I go all in. I bet everything. I mean, I had no income.
Yep.
Couldn't pay my bills. And that really messed with me because I'd always tried to be as responsible as possible. And of course, in my own mind, I'm beating myself up. I'm like, what are you, some kind of piece of shit? You can't even pay your bills.
Oh, sure. Oh,
and I'm like, oh. And so I had to sit myself down and I'm like, you understand, here's what you're trying to go for. And the only way you're going to get there is if you let this shit go. And it was very hard because it was very irresponsible. And it's not looked upon very well. So I did. I let everything go. Goddamn car got repossessed.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then you get to a point, you're like, am I crazy? So I called my mom one night and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing.
Is this like the first time in your life that you've had the internal dialogue that you've expressed outwardly? Like, wow, via this phone call with your mom, like you're acknowledging consciously that you might have fucked up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a monumental moment. That's how bad it was and how scared I was. I was way in over my head.
Sure.
Yeah, it's laughable now, but I mean back then, it was not. And she's like, well, there's you must have saw something that you believed in, and she goes, you probably owe it to yourself to see it through. And I'm like,
way to go, Mom.
I know, right?
Because that conversation goes a completely different direction for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So good for her.
Yeah, that was
pretty cool.
It helped me out a lot. So honestly, that would, if it would have been probably anything less than that, it probably would have broke me, and I probably would have went. I don't know what would have happened, but so I'm like, oh, because what it did for me was let me think I'm not crazy. I did see something, because it's very easy. When shit starts stacking up on top of you, you just get pushed so far down. There is no light.
Yeah.
And let alone any perspective. So you forget why you were even there in the first place.
Right.
And so all that happens. And then to make it even sweeter, I get really sick. That was cool. So there were stomach issues.
Yeah. Ulcers and whatnot.
Yeah. It got really funky, man. And this, it got real bad, and it was very uncomfortable and unpleasant for many a months to come. But so it just kept stacking, and probably in the 8th month, give or take, I think, we found 3 guys who each gave us a small check. It was our little baby seed capital. Yeah. And for us, that was like a land, that was
like a monumental moment right there.
And so that kind of reignites you and lights that spark, and you're like, oh, we can do this. And, that first year of that was absolute hell. And the learning curve from where I was at, and what I thought I could be and wanted to be, and where I thought I was going to play, there was such a gap. It took quite a while to close that. And that was like 10 years ago. So it's taken about that entire time to actually kind of get reality.
Sure. And when did you happen upon Harold? Because I think that he's a critical part to your story, because I've only known you with him, and in within the context of Small Business 101 and becoming the coach of entrepreneurs, I know that he's been just a huge influence on your ability to drive that message. You becoming the vehicle to drive that message.
Yeah. Good old Harold.
And he's just an extremely interesting individual by himself, but in the little interaction I've had with him, I can tell as our relationship has expanded what an influence he is on how you approach business now.
Yeah. So I actually met him at the beginning of this raising capital thing. That's where it all started. My partner at the time, he was talking to some woman who was an accountant, and she said, "Oh, you're looking for money. You need to go talk to Harold." And so we met Harold, and I'm like, wow, this guy's interesting. I'm like, okay. I mean, where I think things are and what they are versus how they really are. I was like, holy shit, I'm way off here. And but I knew there was something to this guy.
Sure.
I had, for whatever reason, I had enough sense or knowing within myself that this guy was, a real guy and a lot of depth to him, and he knew what the hell he was talking about. And so we started spending time with him and learning, and he's like, well, and he never, knowing what I know of him now and the shit that he's done in his experience, I mean, for him to come in where we were at and be supportive and guide us, even though, I mean, he's looking at us thinking we're smoking crack because it's just, there's no way.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. And he had helped us for free. He never asked for anything. Never once, nothing.
Yeah.
And we finally got that little bit of money. And so one night he had invited us to go to El Charro over in Paradise Valley.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I think it was like a $500 check.
Okay.
Which he had never asked for anything, and it wasn't much, not for what he had done, but so we gave it to him. And I remember he looked at it and he's like, "What's this?" And he, looks and he's like, he goes, "Thank you." He put it in his pocket. And it was cool because you could see the look on his face, like he didn't expect that at all.
Sure.
And it was just the thought that meant something to him. So anyway, that was the start of that relationship.
Okay.
So things go on. It's, I don't know how long it's been. Maybe it's been about a year. And then I had the dubious honor of being fired from my own company. I recommend everybody does it once.
Yeah, there you go, Steve Jobs. All right.
Yeah. Without all the upside.
Yeah.
So, back then, that was kind of a big deal for me.
Yeah.
Because I was so invested in this in every what way. And I didn't know what to do. I was pretty much upside down. I was like mentally and emotionally, I'm like, how does this happen? I've never put that much energy into something and then been like, hey, you're not a good fit anymore. I'm like, I was so pissed off.
Ouch.
Yeah.
God, I was so angry.
Yeah.
I was pretty bitter for a while. Naturally.
Yeah. Sure, of course.
But that's when I started spending personal time with Harold. And, I'd ride around with him and he would just talk to me. And he'd talk to me about that. He goes, listen, he's like, it's not a big deal. It doesn't mean anything. And he said, they're your friends. He goes, do you want to not have that friendship? And at the course at the time, I'm like, well, I guess it doesn't really matter, which wasn't true at all.
Ego all day, huh?
Oh my God. Well, and just the emotional
Right.
content. I mean, I've never been in that situation, let alone that extreme.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's not a big deal. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. Easy for you to say. And I didn't know what he had been through in life. I didn't know a lot about him at that point. And so I started spending time with him.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was going to do. And quite frankly, I didn't have a lot of motivation. So followed him around, started learning, asked if I could, follow him around some more. And I think I ended up following him around for at least one solid year, just being there.
So as you're some context, are you literally like fly on the wall following him around? Or are you kind of providing a function for the things that he does in terms of like an executive assistant type role? Like,
no, there wasn't really anything I had to offer. I mean, like nothing.
he literally just sees something in you and he's, tag along if you want. Enjoy the ride.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a moment when I was talking to him. I was at his house in his home office.
Uh-huh.
And because at that point, too, I really wanted to, I still didn't know what I wanted to be. I don't even know if that's possible. For some, it is, not me. And, but I really wanted to be authentic and be good at what I was pursuing, which in general was just business, small business. And I knew that he could make me better, and there was a lot to learn there because I was, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I had gotten where I had gotten just on sheer strength and high energy, and I'm not going to fail. Yeah. Even though I technically failed, but I don't know if there is such thing.
Yeah. You just learned
lessons.
Right?
Yeah.
That's it. But I remember him talking, and somehow when he was talking to me, within myself, I was listening, and I'm like, I think this is an opportunity where I can really learn something from this man. And that's how I perceived it. So I just acted as if. And so, yeah. So I was literally kind of a fly on the wall. Okay. And it was kind of awkward because here's this guy who's, by most people's definition, successful, extremely intelligent. I mean, it's crazy. But so I just sit there and it's like, oh, hi, how are you? Oh, great. And then, these guys start talking about something, whether it's, a board meeting or they're talking about money or whatever it is. I'm sitting there, and it was really awkward, but you had to get over that because I had to remind myself I'm here to learn. Right. And that was my intention. I'm like, I'm going to learn as much as I can. So I just watched and listened. And then, eventually he would ask me what I would think. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Seemed all right, or that person was kind of interesting. I'm like, do you really trust that guy? Or, so that's kind of how it started. And then next thing you know, I go from probably almost a year of that, really. And I had no intentions of making any money. That's not what it was. It was just, I knew if I dedicated myself to that, it was purely for education and experience, which paid off in spades. Sure. Is that what they say? Yeah. So after that first year, then he started engaging me because in that time, you're learning the language. Yeah. Anything I've found that I've ever gotten involved in, it's like everything kind of has its own language. Sure. And so what I realized for myself is whatever I started getting involved in, I needed to really learn the language, at least the basics. The language of business, there's a language of banking, there's a language of finance, there's a language for military. I mean, I found for myself that's where it starts. Sure. So I start listening, then I start figuring out, okay, what does that mean? How do I actually intelligently apply that in a conversation that it means something? Right. Because I've done the thing where I threw a word out there. That's always falls flat. Yeah. Ultimate embarrassment. Yeah. Especially in business. I mean, oh my God. Anyway, so things start going, and what had happened is he gave me an opportunity. He had run for many years in Tucson and Phoenix and Scottsdale executive forums. Yep. And so he's got all these CEOs and COOs of companies, and they come to this guy and they care about what he says. Sure. So I sat in on a lot of the forums. Yep. And that's where things started getting more focused and more real, and I could kind of start putting the pieces together, because they would come in there and ask about, how do you operate a business? What's all this shit you got to deal with as the owner? And, how do I fire my sales guy because he's a pain in the ass? I mean, cash flow. I mean, all these things that start becoming things you run into. Yeah. So after doing that for a while, I'm like, what if I could get some entrepreneurs or small business people, if I could get 3, 4, 5 people, put them in a room, and I figured my thing was if I could watch and learn what happens, and I'll get something out of it.
Sure.
So that's what happened. So we ran the forum. Well, he led the forums. I helped
Facilitate.
build them, and the people from the forums became consulting clients. So it went from, learning about the language of business, if you will, watching board meetings, watching, people talking about doing deals and all this stuff, to, okay, here's these executive forums and small business forums. So you start learning about that, and then you roll into consulting. And I had never consulted or been a consultant. So I started consulting.
Yeah.
So I started doing all the heavy lifting, and that's really where things got really exciting for me.
Yeah.
And how long has it been? 7 years? 6 years?
I've known you since the summer of 2012. So 7 years.
Okay. So
Yeah.
So then I
Shit.
spent the last 7 years getting and doing consulting, but a lot of that for me led to getting involved in what these people were doing.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for the last 7 years, and it's been pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's.
You don't suck at it.
Well, thank you. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into where I'm at today.
Yeah.
This is a very condensed version.
Yeah.
That's all good.
But
How would you sort of define your strength with consulting? Because I come from a similar background. I did software consulting, and it's like you're working with the companies and you're not working for them. So having sort of like that insight, that top level insight, and being able to look down and really guide people. How have you sort of like, what is your strength in it, and how have you been able to define it working from customer to customer or client to client?
I think one of my strengths is that is my experience.
Yeah.
And because I've done a lot of startups and early stage ventures. So, I know from the ground up how it works and what it really takes, and how much goes into actually being the owner operator.
Yeah.
And more or less, for a lot of people, to a degree, it's a one man or woman show until they get somebody. And so, I've started from the very bottom with nothing to growing it, adding employees, actually making revenue. I mean, expanding, growing the business. And I can relate to people as an owner operator. I think that definitely helps. And probably because I've eaten so much shit doing it that, I can share with them, like, listen, here's kind of what to expect. I think the biggest thing is sharing information that people can make intelligent decisions with, both personally and professionally. So, yeah, life's hard. You're probably going to get a divorce, but you're completely invested in this business. And if this thing goes away, then the whole family fizzes out financially. So here's what to expect on this side. Here's how you want to manage this side. And I don't ever tell anybody what to do. I just make suggestions, and I'll, again, share information for them to do that. So I think between my general life experience, being the startup guy, being the owner operator, all those things have helped.
Yeah.
And I've always been a pretty good people person. So
Yeah.
it's really just sitting down and talking. It's not, I'm here, you're there, listen to me.
Yeah.
That shit doesn't work. That's what I went through in school.
Sure. Right.
But the people that actually sat down and spent time with me and educated me and kind of walked me through, it made sense. And I like that approach. Things have changed. In the beginning when I was trying to figure all this out, it was more formal because I didn't know how to really do it and what's appropriate and what's not. Because you always hear all this bullshit about here's how it's supposed to be and here's how you're supposed to do it. Or there's a LinkedIn article that says do these 3 things and you're productive and you're smart. I mean, I want to gag when I see these things.
Yeah, so
Most
far
of
off
them
from
are
the truth.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the truth. Actually, you know what? That's probably the biggest strength is you get the truth from me. Here's how it works. Here's what to expect. I wish I could tell you something differently, but, you're going to have to take the hit on this one, but just keep going. Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing.
And with your consulting work, or is it industry specific, or do you work with a variety of different people from different industries? Because I know you have a lot of experience. You went from science to sports to, tech. I mean, you have a vast array of like all these knowledges. Or
yeah, so I've been in health and wellness, consumer credit, cannabis, personal services, soft tech.
Yeah.
I mean,
Fitness.
there's a lot of things missing out of this timeline, but
Because of your diverse experience, I know one of the things that you provided for me in coaching and consulting, I feel like they're very synonymous, is shedding light at the end of the tunnel, right? And in our discovery over the past year in really diving into the money, and I think you created an awareness for me that made a lot of these tough decisions okay.
yeah.
Right? You remove the veil, and if you execute on these things, this is the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
And it makes those decisions worthwhile. And to Jeff's point, is the language of business a universal language, or more in line with his question, do you really have to understand an industry to be successful at what you do?
From my experience, you don't. So to answer the question, no, I'm industry agnostic. I don't care where I position myself. I'm more of a general practitioner. And if it's small business, for the most part, I get it. And that's kind of my thing. And what I mean by that, and this ties into a universal language, I think for the most part it is, because it always comes back to just focusing on the basics. Basics and cause and effect. That's it. I mean, anything more than that, you got to be careful, because you can get a little too smart for your own good, or start doing things where, you don't really know what you're doing. So for myself, I always found if you just focus on the basics, and I try to talk to people and share with them in a universal theme, like, because people get nervous when they're asking for money, or they're trying to get a deal done, or whatever it is. And I just let them know it's no different than having a conversation with anybody about anything. But there's so much to this, the unknown, and the pressure that builds up in there mentally. They start doing weird stuff. So they either talk really fast, or they would say something they normally wouldn't say. And so I try to kind of prep them for that stuff. But and it all goes back to the basics. Talking to somebody is talking to somebody. Be clear about your intentions. A lot of people start talking a million miles an hour, and they want to, that doesn't work for me. I tune you out. But, if you talk slow, just tell me what the deal is, whether you want me to help you, or, vice versa, I want you to help me. I think stating intentions is really a big deal. Yeah. Because most times when people are doing networking, or, I want to get together with you, it's like, it's all bullshit. It's like this, it's all shrouded in this, let's network and talk, but where's the pitch? Like, I'm waiting.
Yeah, sure.
And most of the time when people are coming together, the question is, who's selling who? It's true. That, this guy over here thinks he's doing it, but this one thinks that he's,
Right.
And anyway, going back, I always just try to focus on the basics.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it a universal language? Probably. There's parts of it.
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't know.
What's the part of the deal that you enjoy the most? The absolute startup, like, here's the idea, help me bring it to fruition? Or is it's not going the way that I envisioned, or, if I don't fix something, I'm going out of business, like, save me? Do you like to be the builder or the savior? What do you find more satisfying?
I just like to be the helper.
Okay.
So some situations can be more stressful, and I would prefer not to be around that, but they need you. So I try to be the helper. And I've been in both. Like, I'm about to lose everything, or hey, we got a good thing going, can you help us accelerate it and make sure we get all the right people and the right everything in there. Both. I don't mind. Okay. I mean, for me, it really just comes down to sharing what I know and what I've experienced.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I really don't do any talking, because if I don't know, that can be dangerous if I'm telling you. And if I tell you what I think, it'll probably confuse you.
Yeah. Sure.
So
As you're working with your different clients, you know, in the consulting world, how do you get to the root of like the vulnerability piece and letting them sort of, and it goes back to the book I'm reading, which is Lewis Howes, you know, Mask of Masculinity.
Oh, yeah.
Taking off those masks of the business, like where you said somebody's speaking fast, or they're trying to project materialism, like all these different masks that they wear. And how do you strip that off of them so they can get to the core of like what the root of the problem of the business or experiences that they're having, so you can actually start helping them instead of them trying to put a facade up, so to speak, of like things are great, but then let them say like things aren't great. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have money. I don't have this. How do you get to that point? I find that's the toughest thing with consulting.
that's a really good question. Over the years, what's happened is, because I've been through so many different scenarios on my own and with others, I can tell pretty quick by asking you a few things or talking to you for 5 minutes what's really going on. So the advantage there is that once I kind of have an idea, I can guide the conversation in a way that these things just come about naturally. Because if I ask you a certain question, I mean, either you're going to completely dodge it, or you really have no choice. But if you do it intelligently and with respect, and I think the biggest part is how you are present with the person. You know, if I'm just sitting there like a regular person, like I am, and I'm just talking with you, not to you, not at you, we're just talking, you'd be surprised how much actually happens there. But it's well received. What's not as well received, and you get into the kind of the bullshit, and I did this early on, is having a sales background and doing a lot of selling of stuff and just getting my feet wet. You know, you always want to sit down. It's like there's a pitch and a process, and you know, what's your this and that. I mean, I don't do any of that shit. I threw it all out the window. For me, it's all garbage. Here's what you're supposed to do, and how you're supposed, you know what, it doesn't work. Not for me. If I sit down with you, we have a meaningful conversation, and we just kind of get to it, what's going on. And I'm as straight as I can possibly be, in a nice way. People like it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's more effective.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could say it's more genuine, it's more authentic, and it probably is. I mean, I think that's what kind of lowers the barrier. But if you come in fast and you're talking at them and you're using big words, and, you know, the last thing you want to do is make the person feel like this.
Right.
Look at me, I know fancy words, and here's everything I've done.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. And honestly, I don't want to be in that arena anyway.
Sure.
I spent a lot of time having to really compete and, you know, show up and be aggressive and push it, and I don't want to do any of that. You know, it works for the most part, but I don't like it.
Sure.
And you can skip all that and say, hey, what do you got going on? What do you want to do? I don't even sell. People are referred to me, and I just, well, what do you got? Here's what it is. Here's what I think. And I'm like, you know, if I can help you, I will. Here's what it looks like. But there is no hard sell. There's none of that. I mean, I'm like, here it is. Here's what I can do for you. And that's it.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting. You know, I feel like you've built into your model in the way that you do business, the cultivation and preservation of relationships once the business is done. You know, you and I don't communicate on a consultant level anymore. Probably will down the future, because, you know, as things continue to evolve, you know, I'll probably need your counsel again at some point. But the fact that we're able to, you do a really good job of just checking in, because just like we were talking about before we got on the show, I think one of the downsides to what you do from a fulfillment and gratification standpoint is you don't get to see the fruits of the seeds that you plant,
Not all the time.
you're very proactive in preserving that relationship once the quote unquote contract has expired. You know, like I know a lot of the things that I've achieved with the gym over the last year is a direct result of your consultation. And were we not to continue our relationship beyond the consulting, you really wouldn't have any idea that it worked, quote unquote.
For the most part, I mean, I know that the things that we did, I knew that, you know, as you were completing most of them while I was with you, and then there was a few things you went on to complete beyond that. I knew, though, that if all of them were completed, you know, we did the math, so we knew what it would be. And a lot of this is formulaic to a degree for me. I mean, if you do this and this, you're going to get this. So a lot of times I don't get to see some of it. There's been some instances where it's just been, we only need you for this. Yeah. And then they're off. Okay. And, you know, I'll still stay in touch and drop a line and whatever, but some of them, you know, they're pretty busy. Yeah. But no, for the most part, I really try to stay in touch with everybody. Yeah. I don't know. Everybody I've worked with, they've been good people. So, you know, naturally, I guess a relationship comes of it. So, which helps. I mean, that's made a big difference for me. And I like that. Yeah. It's more meaningful to me. Yeah.
How would you sort of define your vision for yourself and your company and what you're trying to put out into the world at this point?
To be completely honest, I don't really have a vision for this. I know it sounds crazy. I mean, you've heard me say this recently. I'm at a point in my life, business is okay. I mean, it serves its purpose, but I don't give a shit about business. I don't. It doesn't mean anything to me. At one point, it was everything, and I went all in. You know, I had a couple singles. I never became uber rich. I never made $1 million after tax. But I had a couple singles, and I made some decent cash, did a couple things, and I've always tried to be as reasonable as I can and, you know, live within my means. I'm at a point now, if I can just do what I'm doing and maintain this lifestyle and just be there and help, that's fine. But I have no real vision beyond that, other than if I can find good people and we can do something, great. If not, I don't care. Like, there's a guy I'm working with right now, and he's out in Tahoe, and he's in the cannabis space, and he's got a pretty cool thing happening. And he was asking me some questions about what's happening, making money, and I told him, you know, I've never made on one deal $1 million after tax, which, by the way, that's pretty hard to do. There's a huge disconnect between making money and keeping money and how much is actually good money. But anyway, I told him, he had asked kind of where I'd been and what I wanted to keep doing. I said, this is it, man. And I said, if I ever make any real money, big money beyond this, I said, you know, it'll be because of good guys like him that I can help out a lot, and I don't have to worry about anything. And if they do make it, I know they'll do something. But I have no expectation. I used to have so many expectations, and that was, for me, it created a lot of limitation. And the blinders were on. Yeah. You're not taking into account all the other things, let alone the other person, when all you can think about is yourself and how you're going to make this money. But that was for me. Maybe some people are different. But yeah. So I kind of backed off that whole thing. And I live in Sedona. I'm kind of half in, half out. You know, I have a handful of people I work with, and the rest of the time I'm being a dad now, which just happened. And
congratulations, man.
Thank you. And I'm outdoors. But that's it. That's my ambition. If I had a vision, that's it. Yeah. Let me maintain my wonderful lifestyle. Let me continue to be in what I think is one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I'm cool. Yeah. I don't have the grandiose plans or.
Yeah. Have you heard the E-Myth? In the book, he speaks to, it's about a fisherman.
Interesting.
Who lives on the beach. Okay. Takes out a couple of charters a day, comes back, cooks the fish, spends time with his family, has a beer, relaxes. That's the day.
Perfect.
Right? Exactly. CEO of some company comes in, and he says, "Hey, we can blow this up, right? You can have 10 boats, making money, blah blah blah, and you can hang out on the beach and have a beer every day, right?" The fisherman is forward thinking enough that he comes back to the CEO and he says, "Why would I put in all that work just to end up where I'm already at?"
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that's like the huge, like, mystery of this thing that we do in creating business and driving industry and stuff, is you're doing all this work to create this perfect circumstance when it's actually really, really achievable if you're already happy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the missing ingredient that a lot of people completely bypass because they've got those blinders on. They're doing it paint by numbers and following the quote unquote success formula of hustle and grind, and only to end up, at 60.
Yeah. You got
maybe
your timeshare on the beach.
Happy and fulfilled. When you can bypass so much of that shit, if you have a true understanding of what it indeed makes you happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're spot on. And it took me a long time to get there. And Harold used to beat up on me all the time. He's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "What are your priorities?" And he'd always say, it's who you hold, where you live, and what you do. And that never meant anything.
Like in that
me.
order?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that was the order. And it never meant anything to me. And I'm like, and it wasn't until a little over a year ago I'd started another company. And I shit the bed.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't too terrible, but it wasn't good either.
Yeah.
I mean, and after that, that's, owning and operating, having employees, having investors or creditors, and, all that pressure on you. Some guys totally get off on it, and I did for a while.
Yeah.
But there was so much stress, it wasn't even fun. And by the way, the crazy thing about that, and I found, and he told me this too, he always tell me, he goes, I'm stressed out. He goes, "Yeah, well, it's all self-induced." I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "I got this, and and so I sat down and I'm like, or self-imposed. That's what he said. And I'm like, Jesus, it is self-imposed. And I've been operating like this for how many years?
Yeah.
I'm like, I think I've had enough. But anyway, back to those three things. After that happened, I thought, it was a epic failure because I had these super grandiose expectations and I was going to do all these things. And actually, once it was over, that was the most relieved I've been in years.
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
It ended up becoming the best thing.
Right.
That's when I moved to Sedona. And I'd still maintain clients while I was doing that. So I always kept the momentum, but I feel better now than I've ever felt about it. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, there's not all these self-imposed, expectations and stress that, I guess one of the things for me too that drives me nuts, the term success.
Yeah.
It is, in my world, 1,000% subjective. I mean, it is different for everybody.
Yep.
I think what happens is a lot of people, because they don't know, and then the stuff that they read are people that tell them, who, by the way, probably aren't really successful, most of them. Maybe in their own right in certain things, but where these people want to go. Success could be as simple as you work for yourself, you pay your bills, and you can take a couple of trips, and you can go hike whenever you want to hike. That's successful.
Yeah.
And that's a great win, by the way. You're fully self-employed. You don't have to rely on anybody. You're doing your own thing. That's huge. Oh, you actually cleared a couple $100,000 after tax in a year? That's a big win. You know how many people actually get a check for $200,000 that are small business people and entrepreneurs?
Oh, it's very small.
Very small. By the way, you know how many people actually have more than $10,000 in their bank account? Not very many.
Not very many. Because to be 1% in America, you make $350,000 a year. That's the 1%.
Yeah.
It's very small.
So-
People think it's a million. It's
So
not.
if you do make $300,000 a year, I didn't realize.
That's rarefied air.
Yeah, you don't realize what
Yeah.
you're in this percentage, but things are so convoluted. I mean,
Yeah.
and everybody thinks you got to just go hit it and be the biggest thing and make all this money. I mean, the moral of the story is quality of life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Harold kept beating me up on these things, and it just it took me a while, but thank God it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So yeah, do I get really excited about this stuff anymore? No. Do I like trying to help however I can? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I can do that and offset some things and maintain my life,
Yeah.
it's cool.
That's what's up.
That makes a lot of sense. Because it goes to, like, I've been just reading over, like, some of the Tony Robbins stuff that I read in the past. And it goes to where he's talking about, in life, what we're really chasing is the feeling of what we think the means. And means is like the vehicle, like the car, the money. Those are just the means. He's like, you're not chasing the means. You're chasing the feelings that you believe those means will bring you.
Yeah.
Success, happiness, fulfillment, whatever, love, joy.
Yeah.
And when you break it down to just like those two simple things, it's like, wow, life is simple, but we make it complex.
Yeah.
Like going to what you're talking about, success. You have two men. One guy makes $100 million a year. The other guy maybe makes $30,000 a year. He asked the guy who makes $100 million, "Are you successful?" He's like, "No, because I don't have this, 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 and this." Then he goes to the guy who makes $30,000 a year. He's like, "Are you successful, sir?" He's like, "I am." He said, "Why are you successful?" "Because every day my feet that I wake up and my feet are on the ground, it's a success."
Yeah.
He's like, he's made it so easy for him, the guy making $30,000, to be successful, and the other guy's made it so complicated to be successful that there's a disconnect. He's like, make it simple for yourself to have a win, like as you mentioned, and don't make things so complex. And when you start thinking about like that mindset, you're like, wow, there's a lot of things, like just listening to your story, and I just reflect, I'm like, wow, I've made shit complicated. It's time to just pare it down, make it simplified.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the other thing, the basics and simplicity. And that's a part of my approach too, is it's just super simple. It's not, the more you try to get complex and complicated or sophisticated, and you start watching it,
Yes.
it doesn't work. So my whole thing about success is, I guess I'd encourage people to really sit down and really, what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And how does that tie to quality of life? How does that, if you have somebody, what does that mean? Are you where you want to be, and are you doing what you want to do? Because at the end of the day, those are the most important things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, running around chasing your tail, and it's not to say it's a bad thing. I mean, if that's what you want to do, I know guys that are doing it, and there's guys out there right now that not only are they doing it, and they're getting rich, especially in cannabis. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
But that's okay. It's what they like doing.
Right.
But I've watched them. I mean, I've seen the stress that it puts on them. I mean, if you want to be the party boy, that's okay. It's all good. But, for most people who they want to be entrepreneurs or small business, I mean, I would just encourage them to kind of get reality and be reasonable about all that stuff. Because if you really have a business and you got a couple of employees and you can take out $200,000, and that's after tax, you're good. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It is. And by the way, it's all relative. Money.
Sure.
I mean, I meet and talk with people that they got more millions than you can count. And then, one guy's got 5 million and one guy's got $50. It's all relative.
Yeah.
You hear that's a lot of money. Well, it depends who you're sitting with.
Sure. Yep.
And then the other thing I've seen people, they get around these money people and they make the mistake of thinking that they are that person.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And by that, it's, that they have that kind of cash and those
That false
capabilities.
identity. Yeah.
You got to, stay grounded, get reality.
Yeah.
But I'd say one of the most important things for me was where I got the most help, and when people came through, like a Harold or a Scott or whoever it was, it was because I was just extremely sincere. There was no fancy anything. It was like, you know what? Here's where I'm at. Here's what I got. And here's what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
And I got help.
And they can see that. They can feel it.
Yeah.
They do.
Sure.
And, guys like that, they want to know that you're sincere and that it's worth it for them to get involved with you.
Yeah.
I mean, same way we're sitting here now, or you guys are friends, or we're together. I mean, between you two, there's a level of trust and respect that you say, hey, I want you to meet this guy. Oh, okay, cool. And you're already open. I walk in and, you know, super nice. I mean, like I've known you.
Yeah.
But that's if you really want to focus on building something great and doing something, it comes from this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been the most meaningful for me. That's been the most rewarding. It's interesting because I send a lot of business to different people, and they always say, what can I pay you? And I tell them nothing. I don't want anything. I don't do referral fees. If I send them to you, it's because it's a good fit for you, and vice versa, and you can help them.
Yep.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? So what I started doing is I just said, listen, I said, you want to do something for me? If I ever need your help, or one of the people I'm working with needs your help, help us out.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times that has been good for everybody.
Sure.
So I either get one of my clients discounted work or free advice or, you know, whatever. I mean, that has actually really propelled and fueled what I'm doing. And there's just a natural rhythm to that you can't get any other way.
Yeah.
When did that shift to that abundance mindset that you have come, and you've just let go of that scarcity mindset? Can you pinpoint a moment that shift occurred?
Right before I moved to Sedona.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was still kind of hung up and didn't quite have my priorities right. And that was another thing. Priorities are really, really, really important. The challenge for me was trying to figure out what they were.
Yeah.
How do you really do that? I mean, unless, you know, you end up getting a family, which happened to me recently, and that definitely really crystallized things even further. But I mean, how do you really figure out what your real priorities are?
Yeah.
Especially if you're like us and you're out turning and burning and trying to do all these different things. Like, it's really easy to get distracted.
Sure.
So, you know, what happened was, and I share this with people, is I don't think people really get things until they feel it.
Yep.
You can talk till you're blue in the face. They'll tell you everything. It's not until something happens that they have to feel it that they get it.
Yeah.
And so this last go around for me, I really felt a lot of things, and that's what snapped me out of it and got my attention. And I was like, holy shit. And again, what I thought would be one of the worst things ended up becoming the best thing. So, you know, for me, I found it was important to the best of your ability, try to stay neutral.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it's so easy to pass judgment on anything, life, business, relationships.
Yeah.
And what I found for myself was that the moment I did that, I couldn't see beyond that. So I limit my own sight.
Yeah.
That's where it stops. Versus if I'm as neutral as I can be and I'm not judging it, doesn't mean I haven't thought about it. I'm not judging it. I can see beyond, and I can keep going beyond. But when we start doing that stuff, you start doing the judgment game. You just block yourself in.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you're either fucked up, angry, bitter. You know, things aren't working, and you can't figure out why.
Sure.
Right.
Because if it's not what you think or believe, or it's not fitting your plan, the hell with it.
Damn.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Sure.
It doesn't work. So back to priorities.
Yeah. So now you're living your perfect day every day, right?
Yeah, it doesn't get old. You wake up, you saw the view.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
Every day that I've been there, I wake up and I go look out front, I look out back, and I'm like, this has not gotten old.
Winning.
I
Yeah.
love that.
That being said, what do you do each and every day to empower your journey? Like, what's the thing that is part of your daily practice over everything that you've experienced and everything that you've taken in and everything that you've thrown away? What have you kept that has brought you to this point?
So I'm clear. What do I do every day? Okay. I try to almost every day. Usually what happens for me is it's in the late hours of the night or early hours of the morning. And now that I'm a dad, I go to bed at like 2 or 3 and I'm up at 6 or 7. So I don't sleep, but
it gets better, I promise.
oh, good. For me, probably one of the biggest things is once I'm through the day and all the phone calls have been made or things have been done or emails sent or there's things going on, I sit by myself and I just reflect on everything that's transpired. And I do that for a couple reasons, to make sure I'm not missing anything for myself and others involved. And that way I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm real adamant about if I'm going to do it, I'm there and I'm on it. And, so I just spend the time to reflect.
Yeah.
What was going on? What was going on with the people or the person? What does that really mean? Okay, where's this going to go? Is there anything that's going to come up that's going to be a challenge? And by doing that, I feel like, I don't know if I necessarily stay ahead of things, but it makes my life easier and helps kind of guide me because I've looked into it.
Yeah.
And I have a pretty good feel of what's going to happen.
Sure.
So when it does come, whether you have to go left or go right, I'm good with either way.
Yeah.
Because I knew that there was going to be this fork in the road. Very rarely is there something that anymore that I was completely unaccounted for that's a shocker.
Sure.
But I'd say just sitting down, thinking about things, reflecting. That's probably one of my biggest things. And then with that, planning, being organized.
Sure.
Because, working with different people and having different projects, I think one of my other strengths has been being able to plan and organize.
Yeah.
Which you'd be surprised how many people can't do that.
That's why we hire you, bro. I'll just speak for me. That's why I fucking hired you. So.
Case in point. So, yeah.
I want to run this gym. I want to start a family. Oh, this podcast sounds like a good idea. Oh, by the way, hey, Brandon, I started all these things. Help me figure it out.
Here's the plan.
Right.
Yeah, what else?
I love what's up. Then where can everybody follow you and support you with everything you're going personally and for your business?
My personal life is pretty private.
Good.
So, actually, it's very private. I mean, the only social media outlet I'm on is LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I don't do anything exciting for anyone to follow me. But thank you.
Yeah.
I do have, there's a website, smallbusiness101.com.
Okay.
But yeah, I like just kind of being under the radar and, simple life.
Cool.
Love it, dude.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, my man.
Dude, for everything that you're putting in the world and the fact that you've achieved your perfect day, most people don't get there for another 30 years, if that.
If ever, right?
So, I commend you for that, and I'm extremely grateful for you helping me find my perfect day, because this conversation is part of that. So appreciate you being present, appreciate you being authentic and sharing your story. And, you're going to empower somebody's journey to, flip the switch and become better because of this conversation. So appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah. And until next time, guys, feed me, fuel me.
Bye.